Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something really cool. It's this idea of mental prisons. And basically it's all these limitations that we put on ourselves, without even really realizing it.
Yeah.
It's wild. So we're taking a look at this YouTube video. It's called How to Escape Your Mental Prison, Mental Psychology.
Yeah.
And it's by this creator, Conscious Mind. I've got to say, it's amazing the stuff that you find in like random corners of the internet.
You really do. It's like this whole universe of knowledge has just opened up.
Exactly. You can learn pretty much anything.
Yeah.
So this video in particular, it's really interesting. It uses this like powerful metaphor of a mental prison, right?
Right.
To show how our thoughts and beliefs, especially the negative ones,
Yeah.
can actually trap us. And it made me think about this time, years ago, when I was like completely terrified of public speaking, like really bad. Like I'd get, sweaty palms, heart racing, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, yeah. I know that feeling.
It felt like this huge obstacle, completely controlling my choice. And I couldn't get over it. But you know what? Finally forced myself to do it. And you know what I realized? The fear. It was so much worse in my reality.
Yeah. It's so common, though.
I know.
We build up these elaborate prisons in our minds and have all these like bars made of, these limiting beliefs and fears. And the crazy part is we often don't even realize we're trapped, right?
Right.
Because we build this prison so slowly over time.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to feel like, well, this is just the way things are.
That's exactly it. It's like we're given this script, right? It's like, this is who you are. This is what you can achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And we blindly follow it. We never stop to ask, well, hold on, is there another way?
Yeah.
And it's really wild. The video actually says that most people, even after they get a glimpse of freedom, they actually end up going back to their mental prison.
It's true. They retreat back to that comfort.
It's so weird. I don't get it. Why would anyone choose to go back to feeling trapped?
Well, I think it's because, the unknown, it can be scary.
Uh-huh.
Our brains, they're wired to prioritize safety and what's familiar, even if it means staying stuck.
Right.
Like, even if it means we're not really happy.
Uh-huh.
And so when we try to step outside that comfort zone, even if it's towards something better, something we really want, it triggers this like primal fear in us.
It's like we're programmed to choose the devil we know, right?
It is. It's like that saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. It's so true.
So recognizing those bars you were talking about, the limiting beliefs and the fears that make up that mental prison, that's the first step to actually escaping.
Oh, absolutely. You have to become aware of them.
Okay.
And the way to do that is to start paying attention to the assumptions that we're making, about ourselves and the world. Like, have you ever just, caught yourself thinking, ugh, I'm just not good at math or, I'm not creative. Where do those beliefs come from?
That's a good question.
Are they based on, actual experiences, or did somebody tell you that when you were a kid?
Yeah.
It's like you can't draw or you're not good with numbers.
Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to that. I remember I used to believe, like deep down, that I wasn't a numbers person. Like it was a fact.
Yeah.
Because I really struggled with math in high school, like really struggled.
Yeah.
But then later on, like much later, I found myself, like I was fascinated by statistics and data analysis.
Oh, wow.
And it hit me that, these beliefs that we just accept without question, they can really hold us back.
They really can. They can shape our entire lives. Another thing the video talks about is fear.
Okay.
It talks about fear being like shadows on a wall.
Oh, okay.
So, they look huge and menacing from a distance, but then when you get closer, when you actually approach them, they lose their power.
It's like those shadows they're almost like illusions, right? They're projections of our own anxieties, but not necessarily, reality.
Exactly. And, confronting those fears head on, instead of just avoiding them, that's what really sets us free. The video, it makes a really good point about that. It's like the act of facing our fears, that's what liberates us.
So it's not about eliminating fear altogether. It's more about like acknowledging it and understanding it and then, moving forward anyway.
Exactly. And that, that brings us to the next step, which is this idea of rewriting the script. Mm-hmm. The video really emphasizes that our beliefs, they're not like fixed truths. They're more like stories that we've learned and we can change them.
Rewriting the script.
Yeah.
That sounds like we're talking about like taking control of our own narrative, but how do we actually do that? How do we change these deep beliefs that we've had, for years, maybe our whole life?
Well, I think it starts with becoming aware of the language that we're using, both to ourselves in our own heads and to other people.
Yeah.
Like, for example, instead of saying, I'm not good enough, we can choose to say, I'm learning and growing.
Okay.
And instead of seeing failure as like, this reflection of our worth as a human being, we can reframe it as feedback.
Yeah.
Like it's just an opportunity to learn and do things differently next time.
So it's about making that conscious effort to replace those old negative thoughts, like you were saying, with more, positive and empowering ones.
Exactly. It's like you're training your brain to think in a new way.
It's like we're literally rewiring our brains.
We are. And the video, it really highlights how powerful language is. What we tell ourselves over and over again, it becomes our reality.
Wow.
So choosing words that uplift us and encourage us instead of those that, hold us back, that can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking of rewiring, the video talks about how our environment also plays a role in shaping our beliefs and behaviors.
Okay, so it's not just about the internal work, it's also about the external
Yeah. Both are important. The people we surround ourselves with, the things we read and watch, even the physical spaces we spend time in, all of that has an impact on.
It makes me think of that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right. Exactly. If we're always surrounded by negativity or criticism or limiting beliefs, it's going to be so much harder to break free. But, on the other hand, if we intentionally surround ourselves with positive and supportive people and things, it's like we're creating this fertile ground for growth.
It's like building a mental ecosystem that supports the new, empowered version of ourselves. So what can we actually do to cultivate that kind of environment? What are some practical steps?
Well, the video uses the example of travel.
Okay.
It says that immersing ourselves in new cultures and perspectives, that can really help break down limiting beliefs and help us see the world in a new way.
That makes sense. Stepping outside of our comfort zone, literally and figuratively, it can really...
It's like shaking up that snow globe of our minds, You see things with fresh eyes.
I love that.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as, traveling to another country.
Right.
It could be as simple as trying a new hobby or reading a book that's outside of your usual genre, or even just having a conversation with someone who has different views than you.
I love that. It's about being open to new experiences and new ways of being in the world. But what about people who are naturally drawn to the familiar, to routine? How do we push ourselves out of those comfortable little bubbles?
That is a really great question, and that's something we're going to dig into in part 2. But I think for now, it's important to remember that growth, it often involves some level of discomfort. It means stepping outside of those familiar patterns, those well-worn paths, and venturing into the unknown. And yeah, that can be a little bit scary, but it's also, it's also where the magic happens, where we discover new possibilities and unlock our true potential.
Okay, can't wait to hear more. Welcome back. We were talking about how to make a better space for ourselves, mentally, to help us break free from those mental prisons.
Yeah. It's really interesting you use the word cultivate, because it really is about actively creating the right space to grow. Mm-hmm. Think about a garden, right? Mm-hmm. You're not just going to throw some seeds on the ground and hope for the best.
Right.
You've got to prepare the soil, make sure they have enough sunlight and water. You've got to protect them.
I see what you mean.
So we need to be just as careful with our minds,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And the company we keep is a big part of that. The people we surround ourselves with, they really influence our thoughts and beliefs, even how we act. The video actually says that our environment helped build the prison in the first place.
Oh.
So, yeah, choosing your friends wisely is a big part of staying free. I know for me, being around positive, supportive people, it really boosts my energy.
Yeah.
It makes me feel more motivated. Yeah. It's like instead of breathing polluted air, you're breathing clean air. You're giving your mind good stuff.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And it's not just about being around the right people. It's also about setting boundaries with people who drain our energy or who bring us down.
Right.
Even if we love them, sometimes we need a little distance from people who don't really support our growth. It's not about cutting them out completely, but just being careful about what we let in.
Like being careful what you put in your body, too.
Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't add something to a dish if we knew it would ruin it.
Right. Exactly.
We got to be just as careful with our mind. And you know what else we have to be mindful of?
What's that?
The information we take in.
Okay, so what we read and watch.
Exactly, yeah. We're constantly bombarded with messages from the news, social media, advertising. It's everywhere.
That's so true.
And all of that affects how we see the world and how we feel.
Right. It's like our minds are sponges.
Yeah. So if we're constantly taking in negative, scary stuff, it's going to be really tough to stay free. That's what the video says anyway.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we deal with that?
Well, instead of just passively absorbing everything, we have to choose carefully. The video calls it curating a mental landscape.
I like that.
Yeah. We have to choose things that feed us and inspire us, you know?
So instead of like mindlessly scrolling or watching TV, we could choose to read books, listen to podcasts, watch documentaries, things that make us think or challenge our views.
Exactly. It's not about ignoring the bad stuff. It's about choosing what we let in.
It's like putting a filter on our minds.
Yes, a good filter. And you know what else is important?
What's that?
Good habits.
So it's not just about what we surround ourselves with. It's also about what we do every day.
Absolutely. The things we do each day, they make up our lives, Our routines, our behaviors, they all influence the results we get.
Okay, so if we want to change for good, we need habits that help us become the people we want to be.
Yeah. And the video suggests that we start by figuring out what habits are holding us back, which ones are keeping us stuck in those old ways of thinking.
Right.
So like, say someone has trouble with procrastination. Maybe they need to look at how they manage their time or how they get organized, their discipline.
Right. Okay.
Then they can start replacing those bad habits with good ones.
It's almost like we're retraining our brains. Right?
And they are, yeah. We're making new connections.
Okay.
And the trick is to start small.
Small changes, you mean?
Yeah. And be consistent. So instead of trying to meditate for a whole hour, just do 5 minutes.
Okay.
Or instead of giving up sugar all at once, just cut out sugary drinks, Small steps.
Right. I like that.
Yeah. You build momentum, and eventually those little changes become habits.
Okay.
And the video also talks about responsibility, which is interesting. It says that to maintain freedom, we have to take responsibility.
That's a good point. Like, once we've escaped those mental prisons, it's up to us to create a life that's really good.
Yeah. We can't blame our circumstances anymore. We get to choose,
Wow.
We choose our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions.
So we go from being like victims to becoming the creators of our own reality.
Exactly. And that's when things get really interesting.
Okay, so welcome back. We've been talking all about how to escape those mental prisons, how to break free and then how to stay free. But, it's not always smooth sailing, is it? It's not like you escape and then poof, you're done.
Not really, no. It's more of an ongoing thing. The video even talks about that, how setbacks are going to happen. It's natural. Think about it. It's like learning to play the piano or something. You don't expect to be a virtuoso overnight, do you?
Right. You're going to hit a lot of wrong notes along the way. So I guess it's the same with, breaking free from these old ways of thinking. Like, we're going to mess up sometimes, fall back into those old habits. It's going to be frustrating.
It definitely can be, especially if we think that freedom means, everything's just easy and perfect all the time. It's not really like that.
So how do we deal with that then? When we fall back into those old patterns, or we just, start doubting everything?
Well, the video talks about being kind to yourself. Like, instead of beating yourself up when you mess up, treat yourself like you'd treat a friend who's going through the same thing.
We need to be our own cheerleaders, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Encouragement over criticism. And, the video actually says that we should see those setbacks as feedback. Like, every time we slip up, it's a chance to learn something about ourselves.
So it's not about being perfect. It's more like, we're figuring things out as we go. We course correct. We get back on track.
That's it. And, even though setbacks can feel bad, it doesn't mean we can't change. It's a journey, right? Not just a one-time thing.
Like climbing a mountain or something.
Yeah.
You're going to have some rough patches, maybe even have to go back down a bit. But you keep your eye on the peak and just keep going, one step at a time.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And, something that can really help is celebrating your win, even the small ones.
Oh, you know what? That reminds me of something you said before about focusing on the process, not just the outcome. So I guess, we should acknowledge all those little steps we're making, even if they seem small.
Absolutely. Every time you choose to be brave instead of afraid, every time you challenge an old belief, every time you step outside your comfort zone, that's a win.
It's like we're building up our freedom muscle,
That's it. And it shows us that we really can change, that we can create the life we want. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about those times when you just, lose your motivation, when you feel discouraged or exhausted from all the work? Is this even worth it?
Oh, yeah, that happens.
The video has an answer for that. It says we need to reconnect with our why.
Our why. Okay, what's that then?
It means remembering why you started this whole journey in the first place. Like, what were you trying to escape from? What did you want your life to look like?
Oh, I see. So, we're tapping back into that feeling that made us want to change.
Yeah. It's like a reminder of what we're working towards.
Yeah.
Because honestly, this whole personal growth thing, it's not always fun. It takes effort, and you're going to have to face some fears, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to see that. So our why, it's like a compass. It helps us stay on course, especially when we feel lost or unsure.
It is, yeah. And when we know our why, all that effort, it doesn't feel so much like a chore. It feels more like, we're investing in ourselves.
That's so powerful. And it reminds me that freedom, it's not just about, getting rid of limitations. It's also about like creating a whole new way of being.
Right.
One that's like intentional and fulfilling.
Yeah. And the video ends by talking about patience and persistence, which I think is a perfect note to end on. Because lasting change, it doesn't happen overnight.
It's like building a house, You need a solid foundation, you need to plan it out, and it takes time and effort to make it strong.
Exactly. So be patient with yourself, celebrate those small wins, and just keep going.
So it's all about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely. And just knowing that we can create a life that's free and fulfilling if we just keep learning and growing.
This has been great. I'm feeling so inspired to put all this into practice.
Me too. It's amazing how a few simple ideas can be so impactful when you really, think about them. I hope everyone listening feels ready to start, breaking down those mental barriers too.
Yeah, totally. Keep pushing those boundaries, keep questioning those limitations, and just remember you have the power to create your own reality.
You do.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself.